Hello, John.
Hello, Anna.
So I was in Avoca in Kilmacanogue, I think it's called. It's down the end of the M50 there. And I was just doing some shopping there, but I went to the back of it and there's a lovely little garden there. It's about probably an acre and a half. And I became interested in the actual site itself because there's trees there, and some of them I thought were 300 or 400 years old. It turns out that the oldest tree in Ireland is actually in the garden, and it's 900 years old. It's a yew tree, and it was planted around 1124. I always thought the oldest tree in Ireland was in St. Patrick's College in Maynooth. It's a yew tree as well, and it's 800 years old, but this would surpass it if it is indeed the oldest tree in Ireland. Okay. So anyway, the site itself was owned by the Jameson Whiskey family, and they built the Glencormac Hotel on that site in 1860, and it was burned to the ground in 1967. At some stage, the Avoca weavers took it over. There's also a tree in the garden. It's a Monterey cypress tree, and there's only two of those in Europe of a mature kind. It's about 60 feet high. So this garden is actually very, very unique in terms of the trees that are in it. I mean, you go a long way in Ireland to find something that's 900 years old and alive. There's a tree there that's
You
900
certainly
years
would.
old. So there you go. That's what we're going to talk about.
Yeah, lovely. Well, that certainly is a very interesting visit. And I've been in that Avoca and we were having a cup of coffee, and I don't think I visited what you visited. So, and many a one goes there and doesn't visit that and find out that information that you found out. So it's good to sort of check around rather than just going in and having a coffee and so on and so forth, and a book of hand weavers to have various items there that they make in themselves down in further along there, thinking near enough in nearly as far as Wicklow or somewhere like that, one of the villages. So and they have one on the M3 which is doing very well as well. So they're you kind of unique in that they have that. But the fact that this tree that you found out a yew tree 900 years old, so planted in the 1100s or something like that. And I was inquiring about who would have planted that, but I think you mentioned that squirrels were in the habit of burying nuts and then maybe couldn't find them. And these are perhaps some of the items that grew from those squirrels all those centuries ago. Because we had the red squirrel in this country before somebody brought in the grey squirrel, and red squirrels now have to be protected because the grey squirrel is a kind of a savage in the squirrel world. And and they don't do, they're not as good as this as the red squirrel. So that's very good. And another little thing that I often heard too was that birds often put droppings and that can have some effect on growth also. So nature is a great way of doing what mankind sometimes doesn't do. For example, we had a lot of oak trees in this country, which are a lovely tree from many point of view, and it's very useful for people living in the country. But unfortunately, we were under the control of the British, and they had a habit. They cut down a lot of our oak trees in this country, which have no right to do, for their own ships that they want to go and interfere with other people in other countries and inflict their own evil on them. Divide and rule. And funny enough, this divide and rule business was considered something evil. If the evil one gets into you, it's what the evil one does is divide and rule. That's the way they manipulate, and a lot of people are affected by that sort of a business. There's confusion in lots of parts of the world, and it comes down to this divide and rule business. So it was a very bad thing for any nation to do. First of all, they should be treating people that they conquer with respect. Isn't that the fundamental civilized thing to do with people? To treat them with respect. That's something the
Absolutely. And
British
and
didn't seem
mentioning,
able to do.
as you mentioned there, respect in the garden. This is a great idea for anybody who's listened to our conversation here. Okay. There's a few trees dotted around the garden. The trees themselves are about probably maybe 7 years old, and there's a plaque under the tree, and it's about remembering people who have passed. And there's a plaque to each person remembering whatever that name of the person was. And I think that's a nice thing to do. That if somebody does pass, plant a tree. Don't wait for the squirrels to do it. You were talking about the squirrels there. Okay, there's a plaque that says, okay, there's a plaque that says there's that a squirrel can actually um, accumulate 10,000 nuts per squirrel. Okay, and they end up burying them and they forget where they put them. So they're actually very good tree planters.
Yeah, without realizing it. And you mentioned Kilmacanogue. Well, that's the way it's spelled, but it's actually pronounced Kilmacany
Okay,
because I'm familiar with that general area. And there's a pub around the corner, and it's called the Glencormac Inn, because Glen Cormac was a feature of that area, and perhaps it went back then. There's an estate, and it's called Glen Cormac Drive or something like this. There's houses in it, and it was that hotel was obviously with the John Jameson Whiskey family building it. It had a sort of certain everything. There was no expense spared, and it was a bit of a tragedy that it burned down in the 1960s,
that's right.
67, I think, which is not that. I would have remembered it, and it was a very exclusive hotel. And funny enough, we had lovely hotels here, there, and yonder around the country, and Holt had three or four of them, and they were lovely hotels. And now it hasn't got any hotel. The last one was the Royal Hotel, and it's going to be apartments. But there was lovely hotels around Holt, and with great views of the sea and all. And they all turned into apartments because there was more money in that and less work. Isn't it a shame that such a lovely site for a hotel to be able to look at the sea and enjoy it? And then now they're apartments for just a few, whereas the many could enjoy it. I visited those hotels in Hoth, in the back of the hill of Hoth. There was one, and it was a lovely hotel, and the food was lovely, and the staff was lovely. It's a shame to see it turned into blinking old apartments. There's enough of them around to give you the sick looking at them all. So there you are. And Kilmacany is the name of the place, and you found out you had a very positive visit there. Did you make any purchase of Arden sweaters or anything? I think they do that type of
No,
stuff.
John Malone, but I bought a book. Just give me 2 seconds now, and okay, and I'll tell you the book that I bought. Okay, I have to go over to my desk. I bought a book because we're going to start a new little series on the channel. Just give me 2 seconds.
Right.
I am back, John Malone. Sorry to keep the audience waiting and your good self. Okay.
Right.
Anyway, so what I done was there was two books competing for my attention. Okay, what I like about Avoca is they mix these random books in with the clothes as you're going around to try and buy a pair of jeans or something. Anyway, so the book that I bought is it's called Small Inventions That Made a Big Difference, and it lists about, oh God, there must be 100 inventions in it. Okay, it's a nice little book, and it goes into like the inventions of, I'll tell you now, the ballpoint pen, ball bearings, transistor, toilet roll, paper clips, smoke detectors, tin cans, and all these different things, and the tea bag, of course. And so we'll do a little thing about each one, I think, about different inventions that helped change the world. Now, that was
That's
competing with
nice. And then lovely.
that was
And then,
competing with another book, which was basically a book about how to be more tree. they talk about, comparing our life to the life of a tree and how like the tree sheds its leaves, and when it sheds its leaves, that's the burden gone for the rest of the year, the weight of the leaves. And sometimes we should all shed our own leaves. Anyway, there was two competing books. That was one of them, Small Inventions. So I think you'd be very
You got
interested
the
in that.
best. You got the best book, because I think probably in this country and in countries like us, the temperate climate, it's good that they shed their leaves because oftentimes the winter can be very stormy, so that the trees then are protected, that they're not going. If the leaves were still on them, they couldn't be knocked down. So it's a safety factor that they shed their leaves as it's coming on towards the winter, and so therefore when the storms come, which they do, puff and blow the house down. And that was a little ditty that we used to have years ago. I forget what the way it went, but it was some puff and blow the house down. Anyways, that's one safety factor for the trees that they shed their leaves, and the ones that you saw in Avoca, they probably shed their leaves and are thus protected.
This is the thing, and but anyway, there were the two books. There's a whole pile of books there. There's very interesting books in Avoca, and I think whoever owns Avoca picks out the books very, very well.
It
They're
was a
very.
family. It was a family that owned it, and I know their name. I don't know whether they were Sinnets. So their surname was Sinnett, and they bought it. And then the father that started. Then there was, I don't know whether his daughters took it over. I don't know if it's still the family business that it started off with. It may very well be a second or third generation. But it was a very good idea to start it, and it has, the book that you got is a very interesting book, and we'll talk about it because you mentioned some products there that we take for granted, and yet were invented by somebody, and that probably was able to benefit in some way financially from it. You'd wonder by how much, but it probably doesn't give that fact, but it sounds very interesting, and we could certainly do books about that.
Yeah, we'll do a little
Sorry,
chapter,
do.
maybe
Um,
a couple of times a week. But the thing about it is, what I liked about the book here on it's called Small Inventions That Made a Big Difference. What I do like about it is that these are ordinary, small little products that everybody, the layman, can make himself. And there's lots of products always to be made in the world, and there's lots of fortunes to be made right now. So it's just to
yeah,
inspire people.
exactly. And simple, the simpler the product, the better, isn't it? That has a useful for the majority of people, shall we say, that use various items that are working perhaps around their home and doing various things. So, like paper clips, I certainly use them, and staples and all the rest of it. So all these things had to be invented by somebody.
They did. So there we go. It's well worth a visit. As I said, you'd go a long way. Sorry, Sean.
You would,
You'd go a long
yeah.
way to try and find a 900-year-old living specimen anywhere in Ireland.
It's nearly worth going to have a visit. I'm going to pay a visit to it now when I'm up that neck of the woods, which I often do be, because I have a good friend now for many years. He lived in Valley View, his name was house. He had a bed and breakfast, and Valley View, and it was Killock, and Kilmacanogue was his address. So when you were sending him a Christmas card or something, the address was as long as your arm. You had to make sure you had enough room to put all in with the
Okay,
various
well,
the items, So a busy little village in many ways, and an interesting little place with history, by the way, quite interesting.
so there we go. Thank you very much, John.
Thank you very much, Oliver.